You got lost souls redefining what's wrong and what's right, blind and unable to tell between darkness and light, of things that they stood for, or could stand up and fight.
Welcome to the Shining Light Podcast. This is Pastor Sam.
And Patrick, no compromise with evil Wyett.
How are you doing today, Patrick?
I am doing okay.
Well, I've heard that you've been kind of a rebel rouser here recently. In fact,
Don't listen to my wife. I better. You don't have to. I have to.
Yeah, I mean, Janet has told me several times that you're a rebel rouser. But,
okay. We'll go with that then.
Yeah. You've been to a couple marches lately.
Yeah, or what do you want to call them, demonstrations or get-togethers. One kind of for the good guys and one for the bad guys.
Yeah.
And you were with the bad guys, so
yeah. Well,
can we talk about that one first?
Yeah, we can talk about the bad guys one first.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, this one was an interesting one.
Yeah.
Especially because I got really close to the crowd.
You did.
And nothing happened, so it's not interesting in that way.
Yeah.
What was interesting about it, though, was I started looking around, and I all of a sudden remembered, my goodness, I am 28 years old. They're probably going to think I'm part of the bad guys. But, then I looked out, and I realized I was the only person in that area that wasn't wearing a mask, and I kind of felt pretty good about myself then after that.
Kind of made you give in, kind of outed you for who you were.
Yeah.
So what had happened was...
Plus, I was wearing a Gingers Are Soulless t-shirt. No, I really wasn't wearing that, but if I had one, I would have.
So, small town here in Iowa.
Hudson.
2,200
people, according to the 2010 census. I'm going to guess we're going to be pretty close to 3,000, though, because we've grown quite a bit in the last 10 years here.
Kind of close to the Waterloo, Cedar Falls area, so just up the road.
But 98.7% Caucasian, just...
Because that was put out. So you had some college kids there at UNI, University of Northern Iowa, these Marxist indoctrinated kids. They decided they were going to hold a Black Lives Matter rally here in Hudson because it's mainly Caucasian. I guess this is the place you want to go and put your Communist Manifesto out there so the people here have to listen to you. So they were going to hold a rally here.
Which, I mean, if you want to get real crazy, like 16% of our police force is African American, even though our population is, only, or is 98.7% Caucasian.
The chief is black.
Yeah, we only have 6 police officers, so that's where I was getting with that.
Okay, and he's in charge, so yeah, pretty good.
I was getting a little cutesy with the percentages.
So you're making my head hurt with these numbers you're starting to throw out.
Yeah, but I mean, Chief Banks, he did an absolute excellent job, I thought, doing this whole thing, and so just want to praise him with that because he did go and say, look, he wasn't really very happy about the march, but he was going to let people display peacefully protest as long as
the keyword is peaceful, and it was peaceful.
And I mean, I can't imagine anybody arguing with that guy.
He's a good-sized gentleman.
Yeah, I sure wouldn't want to argue with him. But yeah, a Black Lives Matter march in Hudson, Iowa. And here's the crazy thing about this. This is the thing that really blew my mind. I think our march was bigger in Hudson than Cedar Falls' was.
Yeah, I think they had maybe 30 or 40, maybe here. It was a little bit more here in Hudson. Again, mainly high school to college age kids showing up. You had a few blacks from the black community here talking, giving their spiel. But I don't know exactly what they were trying to accomplish. Then after they met at the school, and then they marched down the street and what was it they were saying? No justice, no peace. Black Lives Matter. The
hands
usual
up,
mantra.
don't shoot.
Yeah, the usual mantra. And of course, most people around here are going, "What are these people doing walking down the street?" Then they went over the park and wrote it with chalk on the sidewalk and had a little cookout, and then they went home. So there was no altercation here. There was no violence. But they are part of that larger movement, which does, when they have the numbers, resort to violence. That's what they do. That's how they're violent change agents for society. These guys here are, and it appears, because it wasn't just here in Hudson, there was also a small town called Olwine that also had something similar to that schedule. So there appears to be some sort of directive in this movement to not just be doing their vandalism and stuff and their rioting in the big cities, but we need to branch out into smaller communities and try to get our message or recruit or whatever it is they think they're going to accomplish by coming to a place like Hudson.
Yeah, well, and what I think it really comes down to is they're trying to propagandize.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're showing, they're going, look, we're peaceful, as if that's a great achievement. Well, for them it is a great achievement, but that's to be expected. That's the very bare minimum if you have a grievance to do it peacefully.
Right, and I mean, this is important to understand. The more you hear a lie, the more likely you are to believe it.
Especially if there's nobody contradicting that lie.
Right, and that's why you keep hearing the same things over and over and over, and there is no intellectual depth. And that's why if you're to go and to call up your local Black Lives Matter leader, which I'm going to say that, your local Black Lives Matter leader, because you have one in your town or the town next to you, I guarantee it, basically, or at least within a 30-minute drive. You've got a Black Lives leader probably in a 30-minute, maybe an hour drive with you. If you're to go and say, hey, let's sit down and let's have a public debate on this issue. You think they're going to accept that debate?
Probably not. See, they're community organized. It used to be called community organizer, like Barack Obama was, which is just another word for communist agitator. So the labels and the groups change names, but it's the same principle of agitating communist cause, trying to get people at least accepting it. Maybe if you're so willing to go out and be part of it, under the name of, in this case, of we're against racism. Well, everybody pretty much is against racism, but it's not about that. It's about pushing a communist agenda and destroying this nation as we know it. That's what it's about.
So why did you go out to this event, Patrick?
Well, I got wind of it, and so there was some Facebook conversation on it. So I went and started putting some of the truth on there, and fortunately for me, a couple of them wanted to actually engage, which just gave me more opportunity to put out the information people need to know about Black Lives Matter and its Marxist organizers who started its founding and the things they actually stand for. I wasn't trying to convince these people that I was talking to. There's 2 or 3 of them. You can't really deprogram the brainwash that are this far into it. They were the organizers. But I was glad they played along so I could put information out there. So that worked out really well.
Right.
So we wanted
to see
a lot of
this information too. If you want to find out this information, you can find it at theshininglightministries.com. If you look up Revolution USA No Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And that is our most read article. Read it at least 2 more times because it is. It's
really hit at the
important
right
one.
time.
It did.
And the Lord really blessed the distribution
Amen.
of that article.
Yeah.
So we didn't know exactly what. There'd been some kind of. These guys are always kind of talking tough rhetoric. So wanted to be here that evening. So I came down and go to church here, of course. So we went up there and actually looked at it, and there were some other people there that were like-minded with us, and we stood and talked with them for a bit, and we kind of stood at a distance. We were in the shade, and they were out in the sun, other than Sam, who was he was live casting for
the Iowa Standard.
Iowa Standard, yeah.
Another great organization. Go to the iowastandard.com, subscribe to them.
They're on top of stuff, especially down Des Moines, what's going on in the state. Yeah, good stuff. But
this was a really important thing. For one, I think for people to show up to. One, it on the opposite side. One, it gave opportunity if things were to get out of hand to nip it in the butt right away.
Yeah, there's a few of us there that was making sure things are going to be just like the police were doing. We're just going to make sure things are peaceful, nothing gets out of control.
Because I mean, there was a business that was threatened, and that business owner was there standing with us, and I mean, they were very concerned that their business was going to get vandalized because it had been threatened that it was going to get that the organizer said they were going to get even with them or something like that.
Well, we were going to make sure that wasn't going to happen, and it didn't, and there's nothing even close to it. So again, it's a lot of bluff and bluster sometimes, and nothing actually materializes. But an interesting thing was while we were standing there talking to some people that were also there against this protest, a fellow come walking out of the protest, and he had the what do you call it? The collar, the father's collar there?
The clergy collar. He was wearing his shirt backwards. I don't know how you button it that way.
I feel like I'd choke you. And you as a pastor, Pastor Sam, went up and talked to this guy. He's presented himself as clergy, and it was only then, of course, you got to be suspect about that title when you see this guy was there for the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, he had his clergy collar on and a T-shirt on over that said, "Justice is a Jesus thing." And I agree with that statement, just so everybody knows.
Yeah.
Justice is a Jesus thing.
He's bringing justice when he comes back.
That's right. And so I just asked him, well, what's your shirt about? What does it mean? And, you know, I'm kind of younger looking, I guess. And kind of younger looking for an 85-year-old, I think. But
It's the beard, I think.
yeah. And I went up and started talking to him, and I just asked him, you know, what's your shirt about? And he didn't know I was a pastor or anything like that. And I wasn't hiding it from him, but I was just questioning him. In fact, I never once made an argument. I only asked him questions. I wasn't telling him what I believed. I was just asking him questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, come to find out, I started pushing him. What is justice? And by the way, this is a really good thing. I would really encourage you to do. If you get into a conversation like this, ask them to define what does justice mean, because they're probably going to say something to the effect of what this guy said. Well, a consistent, fair standard. To which I just immediately in the back of my mind was going like, well, I got this guy here because the problem is our system is fair. And
show me the law where somebody is discriminating against. In fact, you say, well, this does happen. Yeah, when this does happen, you're in violation of the law. So if there's something happening
actually,
that violates the law...
I'm a little wrong on this. Affirmative action, he's correct. Affirmative action is not fair, and it's not a consistent standard, and it is racist. It's just racist against Caucasians.
Or Asians or anybody else.
But I really pushed him, and you push him on define what is that standard, and come to find out this man didn't believe in not even a literal interpretation of Scripture, but he just believed he could make up stuff wherever he wanted to in Scripture.
He didn't follow all the 10 Commandments, right? He didn't say which ones he did and didn't.
Right.
The New Testament's not really valid. There's no such place as hell.
So Jesus didn't die for an atonement for sin. He died to just be an example.
This sounds very much like the social gospel of Walter Rauschenbusch and that ilk that's kind of at the forefront of this whole social justice movement.
Well, and as it progressed, the conversation, I'll kind of just take us to the end here because we got a lot that we want to go over. I got him to say that earthly justice should reflect heavenly justice, which, okay, sure, why not? I think God's laws, sure. Now, he didn't believe in God's laws, but that's what he thought. But then
was he a Unitarian?
I think so. I think that's where he was going to church, or where he's pastoring.
He'd pastored here before, but now he's pastoring another church in another town.
Maybe it was United Methodist. I think it was United Methodist.
Okay.
But
he sounds very much like Unitarian ideas.
Yeah,
I wasn't part of the I was talking to some other people. You
Yeah.
know, but I could hear a little bit what was going on.
Yeah, he was definitely Unitarian in his salvation belief, because he believed that this was the eternal justice that he believed was that no one would go to hell unless they chose to go to hell, which I agree with.
Except for people who are choosing that every day, they just don't realize it.
Right, but he said you could basically go before God, and in the judgment seat, you could go and say, you know what, God, I don't want to go to hell, and then you can go to heaven. In hell, by the way, it still wouldn't be fire and brimstone. It would just be kind of you're alone.
So it's not as the Bible described it. It's just this gentleman wants to define it himself.
Right.
He must know better than the biblical
God.
writers on God. Yeah.
But anyway, and so I said, so your eternal justice, it's based on God's forgiveness then. And he said, absolutely. He's getting excited. He thinks, man, I'm tracking with him now.
I've got a convert.
Yeah. And I go, so in eternal justice, or earthly justice reflects eternal justice. And he goes, yeah. So I said, so does that mean that all minorities should forgive Caucasians for any injustice that their ancestors would have had, and that would be justice? You know how he answered me?
Oh, boy. He got a little angry, didn't he?
Yeah, he got a little angry, but he says, why are we having this conversation?
Yep.
And I said, because of your shirt.
Yeah.
I just asked you a question about your shirt. I'm just asking what you believe here. I'm just hanging you with your own words.
If you're out here to support an idea, you should at least be able to articulate that idea to me and why you believe the way you do.
Especially when you wear something that signifies that you're a leader. And he told me he was out here as a representative of the church, to which then he asked me...
The Church of Satan.
Yeah. He asked me, are you a resident of Hudson? I said, I am, which kind of surprised him. And he goes, well, what church do you go to? I told him the church I go to, Faith Baptist Church. And he stops and he looks at me and he goes, are you the pastor? And I said, I am. As a matter of fact, I am. To which our conversation ended about 3 minutes later after he told me, well, I don't think we're going to agree on anything. I said, my response was, that's okay. I said, that's
Has he
okay.
been watching the Shining Light podcast?
He must be. but I told him, I go, that's okay. Don't you think we need to have discussion since we don't agree?
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at me. I did one of those and got in his car and left.
That was fun anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, and I will say this. Here's the benefit. I did get to share the gospel with him because I posed it to him as a question more than a statement, but he knew I was making a statement with that question.
That's why he tried to get out of there after a while. He realized that he had already kind of been backed into a corner and hung himself. And what else could he accomplish by further? Yeah, so he decided to go.
But that's not the only rally or event that's happened. In fact, I didn't go to this other one, but you made it up to another one.
There was one on July the 25th, which is a Saturday,
yeah,
down in Marion, Iowa, which is just, it's the edge of Cedar Rapids, which is a decent-sized town here, too. And it was a Back to Blue rally.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually pro-American, pro-police department with all the calls to defund the police and police brutality and all the bad rap that police officers are doing their jobs or getting for doing their jobs. A group got together down there, and there was a park there. It's kind of a squared park. We showed up down there, and we heard there was going to be a massive counter demonstration. So we were kind of, well, if it is, it is. We'll see what happens. Over 300 of us showed up.
Wow.
Had flags. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
I didn't realize there's that many people who showed up. That's great.
There's one fellow that was Lou Rogers. Lou Rogers running for State House here in Iowa. Lou Rogers was there, former Marine.
Okay.
So Lou was there with his family. And we had American flags, and people were honking where they were driving by. Some people were driving by with their flags out now and honking and waving. And
we got a lot of way more than 300 then, if you count people in the cars.
Oh yeah, and people are coming and going too. But there's a big crowd of people there. I think there's a local report done on it too. Black Lives Matter. One guy showed up, catty corner to us, and he held up a sign that said Black Lives Matter. Nobody's paying attention to him. He got bored in about 5 minutes, and he left. He came back with a couple of people. They were standing there looking, and then they just decided to pack it in, call it a day. Then a gal came by, and she got out, and she had a Black Lives Matter sign. I read an article that said she was driving by and decided she needed to get out and protest, counter-protest. Funny you'd be driving by. I guess you have your Black Lives Matter sign in your car the whole time when you just happen to be driving by. So she was out there for a bit. And,
I always carry my Black Lives Matter sign with me, don't you?
Yeah. Now, I will say there's one thing you need to be aware of, and we had the ability there to take care of any problems that would have arisen. There was different groups there that some security was set up there. So this guy comes up early as things are getting started. He comes up on a bicycle. Nothing wrong with that. Has a skateboard on his back. Nothing wrong with that. Longer hair, got a little disheveled. Looks more
something
like
wrong with
wearing a baseball cap. Looks like more he would be on the other side, just looking at him. You can, looks can be deceiving. So this guy's over there, I hope these guys show up, and he's just talking stuff, and he's acting kind of odd. Like, are you on something, I was thinking. Mm-hmm. So when this gal shows up, he has he pulls a bottle of something out, frozen something, nearly frozen water, or one guy said it might have been a beer, and he tosses it her direction, right? Mm-hmm. He goes, oh, sorry, my mistake. He intentionally did this. So what it looks like, and we got on him pretty quick, picked that up, told him to keep moving. We don't want him to be a part of our group. You get an agitator in amongst people that's supposedly on our side, and he causes something. And you get blamed for it. That's what this guy was doing.
And he wasn't really on...
No, he was just there to cause trouble and try to cause some sort of a conflict. Of course, it was just her. And I don't care if you're there or not. You don't throw anything at somebody across the street because you disagree with them. She had every right to be there.
Right.
We can disagree with what she was trying to say, but she had every right to be there. She was being peaceful. She wasn't doing anything that she shouldn't have been doing.
Right.
So we had to move that guy right along.
Well, I'm glad
you have an
agitator.
agitator
Were able to do that.
Yeah. So anyway, it was neat. It was pretty hot out there, but it was nice to see your fellow citizen. And this comes to a point here. So when you see, even on TV, when you're seeing people rioting in Portland or Seattle or Minneapolis, you may see hundreds of people. You may see 1,000. But you're talking about an area where there's hundreds of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. The majority of people in that area aren't out there rioting, even though you see a big clump of people doing it. That minority group that's causing a problem appears to be in the majority. and people are knuckling under to them, the vast majority of people, whether they be white, black, brown, green, purple, whatever color, are not part of that.
Right.
And a lot of the people that are part of it are white.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back, it's an ideological thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about skin color. It's about pushing a Marxist ideology and to destroy this nation as it stands as a constitutional republic and replace it with some sort of a Marxist government. That's what the goal has always been. It's been that goal for decades. The communists in Russia and China and other countries have been pushing money in, people like George Soros, getting these groups organized, getting people together, intersectionality, making people think they're part of an oppressed group, and then getting everybody to go against the system they've been told oppresses them. It's all about this, and it's always been about this. It's just now being more digested by more and more people have been brainwashed in the public education system. The thing is, they've been organized for years, and most of the people, the everyday Americans, have just kind of been sitting back, and it's been happening slowly enough you've not been really aware of it. Well, now you are aware of it, and what this Blue Lives, or Back to Blue, was a push back now, where people now, the everyday Americans, are actually starting to organize as a counter-protest and to try to hold the line on society here in this election year.
Right.
Now, we'll see what happens with the election, but you're starting to see people are finally waking up to the threat and understanding that there is a threat, and it's a very real threat.
Right. And you know, something kind of interesting about this, too, is the Back the Blues, at least in our area, have been much bigger than the Black Lives Matter. But, you know, we really wanted to bring this up to you guys so that you could hear some of the things that we've been out doing, because we haven't been doing a lot of podcasts. We're going to get back to it.
Yeah, we got some trips planned, so
right. Yeah,
we're trying to get a couple taken care of this evening at least, and
yeah, and it's, you know, it's been really good, and we've been doing lots of projects. There's going to be lots of content that's been coming out, and is going to continue to come out. We've been doing lots of different things. Sometimes you got to take a little bit of a lead in the local stuff. You know, when things are getting crazy, you have to do that and take a little bit of a lead. But, you know, one project that you guys heard a lot about, and it's going to be coming out soon, is Darkened Pulpits. And Patrick, you've been writing this for a while. I mean, this is you're telling me how big this is and all this stuff. And probably the most recent delay of this is actually because this Black Lives Matter stuff came out, and you decided to really add this into the book because this really kind of hit at the same time. And so I don't want you to give away the whole chapters that you got on this, one or however many you have. But can you tell people just a little bit about kind of what you cover with the Black Lives Matter in this?
Well, if it had been out on schedule, the book would already be out right now. So the things that I was talking about, the stage being set to happen, weren't happening when I was actually researching and writing it. Well, it is happening now. So the book will be actually complete, the points made, and then the actual thing demonstrated in society. So we talk about where all these ideas came from. Of course, it originally comes from Satan, Garden of Eden. And it moves forward, and you had the Enlightenment in the 1700s where people now started actually questioning the validity of the Bible. Mm-hmm. Now that question of validity, is the Bible true, came the declarations of the 1800s, not the 17th century, but the 1800s. You had the Nietzsche's and the Marx and the Engels and people of that, and Darwin, were actually saying the Bible, we're not asking a question anymore, we're making a declaration that there is no God. Mm-hmm. And then out of that, it moved forward into or even more recent times to what we have today. So we have the Marxist theory being pushed forward. So I talk about Black Lives Matter and some of these Marxist groups because this is what the basis of it is. It's Marxist, it's atheist. Realize that every Marxist group, socialist group, you say, well, I'm a Christian communist. There's actually Christian communists, they claim. Or I'm a socialist Christian or whatever. No, you're not. You're talking about two ideas that are completely polar opposites. You can't be an atheist and also be a Christian. And the foundations of Marxism and the ideas of Marxism are atheistic, but not just atheistic in a neutral sense, but a very militant atheism that hates God and wants to obliterate all knowledge of God, especially the Christian faith, from the minds of men. By force, not asking you to, not presenting a good argument for it, but by the force of law, just as it is in North Korea. North Korea, if you're caught with the Bible, you and 3 generations of your family are wiped out.
Wow.
That's communism at its ultimate. Mm-hmm. So Darkened Pulpits talks about some of these groups and where they came from. And it even goes back to what the communist planks, the 10 communist planks in the Communist Manifesto, moving forward into the 1950s and early 1960s, were 45 ideas that the communists wanted to accomplish, put forth by Cleon Skousen in his book, The Naked Communist. These are the things they wanted to accomplish. Well, when you read those today, you're going, that's not a goal. That's the reality. That's the world I live in today. Most of them have been accomplished. So, and these groups are outgrowths of that, outgrowths of these movements, outgrowths of the ideas of the Frankfurt School and Antonio Gramsci, these cultural Marxists, the Fabian Socialist Society. And they have many disciples that have spread out into governments around the world. They've got into not just the education system in the United States, the secular education system, but also vastly moving through the seminaries. Till today, there's not a whole lot of good options if you're actually a Bible-believing Christian who wants to get a Christian education. Most of our institutions of learning in the Christian church have been corrupted in one form or another with these ideas of social justice. And social justice is the banner under which all these wicked ideas are presented for our consumption.
That's right. And so because I really wanted to point that out, that because some people might be sitting there going like, why isn't the book come out? You guys we talked about that for a while. Well, it's for good reason. It's because
God's timing.
Right.
I mean, I'm doing what I can, but there's delays, and sometimes you're going, why, Lord? I'm ready to finish this thing. I'm ready to get it out there. And this happens and that happens, and you just have to take on a faith. There's a purpose and a cause for it. The book comes out when God wants it finished, when it's done. So we appear to be at that point now, and I'm, like I said, I'm going back through it, and so the chapters are written. I'm going back through it from the start and reading through, polishing it up and editing, making sure that if there's an extraneous information needs to come out, you can always cut stuff and make it. You want to keep it succinct and flowing. That's what I always like to do. Keep you interested. I hate it when I read something that's dry, or it starts bogging down, or it gets too repetitive, and you start losing interest. I want to keep it moving briskly. And for a project this size, it's a task, but since it's broken down to chapters, you do it. What the interesting thing is, this book is, I thought I knew enough to write the book when I started doing it, 2.5 years ago? You realize how much more you learn when you're actually researching to actually put it on paper, but not realizing the Lord's plan for my life, just me in particular. I've been researching this book for decades.
Right.
And it's now coming to fruition. So you wonder sometimes why the Lord works the way he does. You have to be ready to present what he wants you to do. It may be writing a book. It could be anything. It could be witnessing to your neighbor. All these things are important to God, and it's certainly important to people that you're influencing.
Right. And I mean, this is going to be, I think, really the work on social justice that lasts throughout. I think it really could be the authority book on this. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting next to me here. I really believe that. And I've told you that from the very beginning when you told me this and I started reading some of the chapters and things like that. Nobody else is really talking about this. I just had somebody a couple days ago sit down and we were out for dinner. And as they were talking about some things, there's somebody who's involved in politics. They just left their church because of the social justice stuff, and they start telling me, "I'm going to this other church, and this other church is involved in the Acts 29 network." And I say, and I just blurt out, and I go, "Well, that's going to go social justice too. They're woke."
Yeah.
And the person was surprised, and it's somebody who's very involved in politics. He's not woke. Somebody who's very smart theologically, but it's the idea that people. He's been busy researching other things. He hasn't been researching Acts 29. He hasn't been researching the Gospel Coalition. He hasn't been reaching some of these other things. I'm not saying that he wouldn't have seen
Marx.
Yeah, Nine Marxist. Yeah,
and there's all
the
kinds
AND
of stuff.
campaign. Yeah, and the thing is it's not an indictment of those people, because the thing is that they're doing what they're supposed to, and campaign, all those guys are bad guys. I've talked about the people who don't know about it. They don't know about it because they're researching other things. God's given them other projects to do. But what will be of great benefit to them is to have a well-researched book that's just right there, and they can just go and read, whoa, and see the connections just completely in their own words. And that's what you do.
The amazing thing, and to see how everything's connected, how this leads to this and that leads to that. And I present it for you, and you're going to see. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. Some of that stuff I'm just as shocked as you will be when you read it. After a while, though, you kind of come to expect it. But you also start recognizing keywords and phrases and ideas and concepts that they keep pushing. They push it this way, they push it that way, but they keep coming at you with it. You have the Lausanne Conference, 1974. You have the social action that came after the social gospel, and it's morphed into social justice. So these are just generationally, Satan always has something tailor-made for the times, for the people, what they'll believe and what they won't. If this didn't work then, we'll repackage it, we'll represent it, and it'll work today. And it has been working. We're at a critical time in both our nation but in world history that with technology being what it is and ability to influence so many people, a few people can do that. And not only influence, but control. The Bible talks about a one world government. Well, prior to this time in our technological history, a one world government could possibly, closest we had was maybe the Roman Empire, but it wasn't completely around the world. We're talking about the kind of control and surveillance that the Bible talks about in Revelation. We now have that technology available to do just that. And China, in fact, is a microcosm of that large nation of 1.5 billion people. They've got cameras and surveillance everywhere. Imagine that worldwide. This is the sort of system that Satan will use with his beast or the Antichrist to completely control for a limited time the earth.
Right. And the Bible's clear it is going to happen. Now that doesn't mean that we act as defeatists, but it means that we go forward because we want to take as many people to heaven as we can with us. And we don't know when it's going to happen. It looks like it's going to happen closer or sooner rather than later. That's what I would say. That's what that's what everything looks like. But we don't know.
We fight evil on principle. It doesn't matter what you think the outcome is going to be. It's like any game. You get in a game, when you're playing, you could be behind, you keep playing. You play to win.
Right.
So we keep playing. We know we win because we know how this turns out. But right now the problem is there's not been enough voices in active opposition to the evil that's being put forth. You're letting the media think that you're isolated. They're telling you that everybody believes this way except for you. Don't believe what the media say. In fact, turn them off. That's just propaganda. Start watching the Shining Light podcast.
Yep. Twice a day.
And, get around fellow like-minded Christians. If your church is doing the things that we're talking about in the wrong way, find another church. That's what you need to do. Don't stay there just because you're comfortable or because your friends there, you've been there for 20 years. That's not a good reason. You need to be standing forward and maybe go to places where you're uncomfortable in your witness and in your life. You need to be living your life for the Lord.
That's right. Well, for the Shining Light Podcast, this is Pastor Sam.
And Patrick, no compromise with evil, Wyett.
Remember to go to theshininglightministries.com. Once again, that's theshininglightministries.com. Check us out. Find out what we have there. Watch all the
articles, podcasts.
All kinds of stuff.
Do our best.
That's right. Well, have a great...
Talking about evolution.